Hey guys, I hope you're having a great week. This week we are doing our second edition to our Black History Month musicians and important people for music history, and we're talking about Mr. Scott Joplin. So this guy right here, this is him when he was kind of younger. Scott Joplin is a composer and a pianist who became really famous for a certain style of music called ragtime. I know, kind of a funny name. So ragtime was this very distinct American style of music. We're going to hear a couple of his pieces. And he is Scott Joplin is kind of the guy that we give most of the credit to for creating this. And it's a big deal. So remember how we've talked quite a bit about jazz music, and before that we talked quite a bit about classical music. Now, ragtime is this combination of both of those. So you take a lot of the technique and the complexity, the difficult stuff in classical music, and you take kind of that swing, fun, jazzy, exciting rhythm that you experience in jazz music, and when you combine them together, you get this thing that happened in between called ragtime. Now, it's a big deal for a couple of reasons. One, because up until the point of this guy right here, Mr. Scott Joplin, when he was born, it was around the time of the end of the Civil War. Okay, up until that time, pretty much all music had come from overseas. Everything had come from across the Atlantic, over in Europe, sometimes even Asia, but it had come from other parts of the world. Nothing was purely American music. It was a huge deal because this was the very first type of purely American music that we had ever had. And it happened to be by this guy who happens to be African American. He actually was born to a family where his father was a freed slave and his mother was a free woman. And they grew up in Texarkana. He was born in East Texas, and we actually don't know the date that he was born. We think that he was born between 1867 and 1868, and we know that he lived in Texarkana with his family. He was one of 6 children. But it's really interesting. The history is kind of lost sometimes because we didn't keep really great records as a country, and especially for African Americans, there just weren't a lot of records kept, especially for families that had come out of slavery. Like, his parents may not have even known how old they were. And so for us now trying to trace his lineage and his past and his family, it's kind of a big deal because we don't really know exactly how old he was, which is kind of bizarre. Can you imagine if your teacher asked how old you were turning on your birthday and you were like, I'm either 6 or 7, I think, and you don't even know what day your birthday is? Isn't that crazy? So that's kind of a big deal. We know that as he grew up, he lived in Texarkana with his family, and his mom actually cleaned houses. Like, that was her job. And one of the people that she cleaned houses for happened to have this really nice big grand piano. And that family allowed Scott Joplin, her son, to come and learn and practice and teach himself how to play piano. And he also got lessons from a German music teacher who helped him learn and understand classical music. And that was a big deal because he needed that background and that basic information and all of those composers that we've talked about from the past to be able to create his own style of music. And so as Scott grew up, he understood all of the mechanics and the complex parts of classical music, but he really liked the idea of what we think of as African American or like black soul, black blues style music. He really liked that kind of swing rhythm, and jazz wasn't really a thing yet. So he took the spirituals, the songs that he knew from his African American heritage, and combined that feeling, that deep rhythm and strong sense of melody, and combined it with the classical style that he had been taught by his music teacher and in playing piano. And he started writing his own music. So as Scott grew up, he blended those two things to create this style called ragtime. That's what we call it now. And a rag is like a slang term used for a piece of music that would be easy to dance to, or slap your leg or stomp your feet, and that ragtime, that excitement, that feeling of kind of a fast rhythm, when we listen to it, you're going to be able to pick it out very quickly, and that's iconic to this style of music. So ragtime was born when he started creating songs and other people heard it and they started mimicking that style and writing other things that were similar. So it's a big deal. This is the first type of really American music. And by the time that he was grown and he got married, he moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and he sold about 6 pieces. We know he sold about 6 different songs, rags, pieces of music that he could perform, and he had sheet music for that he'd written out and sold. And his most famous piece, probably to date, was called the Maple Leaf Rag. And while it was very, very popular and a lot of people learned it, it wasn't enough money coming in from creating this piece that they had a lot of money. They really didn't. In fact, at one point, they had such a small amount of money that his house or his apartment was repossessed. People came to take all of his stuff away because he couldn't pay his bills. And when that happened, it said that there was an entire opera. He'd written an entire piece and a whole opera, which is kind of like a play or a musical. He'd written the whole thing out and all of the music for it. And that is lost to us today because we don't keep records of things like that. And that was in his possession. It was something that he owned, and when he couldn't pay his bills, they took it away. And it's kind of sad that a lot of artists like him, they did not realize what an impact they made during their lifetime. It wasn't really until after he had passed away and we've played his music for years, it kind of started to get lost in history because there wasn't a lot of record keeping. And it really, there was a big boom of this music coming back in the 1970s. There was this movie called The Sting, and it had a couple famous actors, Robert Redford and Paul Newman, that did this movie, and they used one of his songs. They used one of this guy, Scott Joplin's song. They used the song The Entertainer, and when you listen to it, you're going to immediately recognize it. It's a very iconic tune that we use. A lot of music teachers teach it to their students to play on piano today because it's a good rehearsal piece and it gets kind of stuck in your head. It's easy to remember. And if it wasn't for movies like that using some of these old pieces of music, we might not even have them today. And the information that we do have on Scott Joplin and a lot of people like him are due to the fact that those pieces became important again. So I think it's a really kind of cool story that this guy whose family came from a very humble background, and even in the face of, you know, a war that had just been fought over slavery and his own dad being freed, he was able to rise from that and create this amazing style of music that we still listen to today. So you guys are going to have the opportunity to listen to the first piece, which is the Maple Leaf Rag. Maple leaf, like maple syrup or the maple tree. Maple Leaf Rag. And then secondly, I want you to listen to The Entertainer. Enjoy, guys. Bye-bye.